Okay, welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, we're going to start with the game, all right? If you love technology, stand up or raise your arms. Come on. Stand up if you can stand up. All right. So if you love everything about technology, innovation, mobility, the connectivity, right? You guys are all standing? Awesome. All right. Now sit down if you're an engineer. Sit down if you're a programmer or developer. Sit down if you work in any of the STEM fields. So for those who have remained standing, this panel is mostly for you, but there might be some stuff for the rest of you as well. Okay, so you can sit. Today we're going to talk about tech careers for non-techies. I organized this panel, this is sort of near and dear to my heart, because this is my family. And even for the early 80s, this is pretty I'm the one in the middle. You can see like something here doesn't, match with the others. I come from a family of engineers. My dad was born in the 1940s deep south, so he was not formally educated, but he was a brilliant contractor. He could build anything. He's also a math savant. He could calculate anything, and as a result, he was able to build from the ground up a really successful contracting business, as well as the real estate development. My brother Greg, who's the tall one there, did become an engineer. He became a civil engineer, and he's the first person that taught me how to program. He taught me how to build a PC. He was also my physics tutor. My other brother, Cedric, actually went into interactive or telecommunications, where he worked for companies like AT&T in building out telecommunications infrastructure in developing nations. And my sister, huge gadget gamer, so I was destined for tech geekness, right? Or tech greatness, right? Not really. These were my math SAT scores. Yeah. My mom saw these, and her first response was, "Oh, baby, you couldn't be an engineer." That hurt. That really hurt, right? I wanted to be like my brothers, right? I wanted to be like my dad. So I decided to focus on my strengths, which were like writing, analysis, and art. So I started writing for some local newspapers. I wrote for a local New Jersey newspaper called The Record. I wrote for the Amsterdam News, which was kind of known internationally as the New York Times of the Black community. I also started doing playwriting, and I won a National Playwriting Award for writing a sequel to Ntuzake Shange's Repel Girls. And I got really into filmmaking. This was, the 90s. There were filmmakers like Julie Dash and Leslie Harris and Spike Lee. And so I was like, I can storytell through sight, sound, and motion. And then I also became an activist. I led a boycott from my high school, protesting police brutality, and I appeared on an ABC talk show called Like It Is, talking about student activism. So all of this got me into pretty good school. I went to Cornell, where I was able to major in Africana Studies and film. But the tech bug never left me. I was really fortunate because when I graduated, it was like around 1998, it was the height of the tech boom, and all of these tech companies were just creeping out of nowhere. Everyone was trying to figure out how to make money out of digital media, out of the internet. And so my first job was in digital advertising. I worked for a digital advertising company called PBDO, and my first client was Visa. What we did for Visa was we bought banners and buttons and pop-ups. You guys remember pop-ups, right? I'm kind of going away a little bit, but that was my job, right? I would go to media companies and I would give them money, and in exchange, Visa would run that banner on their site. And it was pretty revolutionary because we were, through that early campaign, convincing consumers that it was okay and safe to use your credit card on the internet, right? And today, look at where we are. So it really revolutionized not just retail, but the economy, the way we know it, as e-commerce is pretty much where everyone is shopping today. So that was really exciting, and it enabled me to not only work with creative types, because it was advertising, but also now I'm working with programmers and web designers and the techies, right? I love tech, right? And I was finally tech adjacent. Wasn't an engineer, but at least I was working with technology, and that fed my soul. And it enabled me to work for companies like Microsoft, Real Networks, some local fan favorites here, Razorfish, Oracle Data Cloud, and several advertising agencies, BBDO, which I mentioned previously, Mediacom, and Horizon Media. And again, my work here was all around digital media, it was all around mobile media, in-game advertising, and finding new ways to reach consumers through technology, through connected media. And it was really exciting, and eventually it led me to my career today, where I basically manage audience and data strategy for the Oracle Data Cloud. My job is to work with marketers and advertising agencies and helping them to figure out how to use data and how to use data platforms to more effectively reach audiences. So I didn't do too bad, for someone who pretty much bombed the math SATs. But I will add, if you're wondering how I got into Cornell, that in addition to being a published writer at 15, I did get a 790 on the purple. hopefully that repeats. Okay, so a career in tech has never been more accessible. And that's really what I want to share with you guys today. If you just Google tech careers for non-techies, tech careers that don't require coding, you are going to get a myriad of options. They're out there. And so what we're going to talk to you today is about our career journeys and how we took our non-math, engineering, tech backgrounds to work in tech fields, to work with engineers, to work for tech companies, and to use technology in our professions in really fulfilling innovative, creative ways. So you've heard my story. I'm going to introduce you to our panelists. My name is Wendy Dunlap. My background, again, is in film and Africana studies. And today I manage audience and data strategies for the Oracle Data Cloud. Panel, please introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon. I'm Amber Blue. I have a background in sociology, but I've been doing program management work at Microsoft in various organizations.
Hi, I'm Megan Malone, and my academic background is in creative writing and theater, and I am a game writer at Pixelberry Studios.
Hi, I'm Jane Park. So this is my first panel, just so everyone, so I'm a little bit nervous, but thank you.
You're doing great.
So I studied visual communication design at University of Washington, and I work as a UX designer at Honeywell.
Hey guys, I went to school for media arts and animation at the Art Institute of Seattle with a bachelor, and I am a test analyst at Google.
Megan Tweed. I worked for 20 years in digital media and marketing. I've also played underground noise rock bands for that same amount of time. And right now I am leading the digital practice for Edelman, a global communications firm.
Awesome. So I'm going to throw out my first question to Megan, because you mentioned that your background in digital communications and digital advertising, and I mentioned it as well. A lot of people don't know what digital advertising is. Can you talk a little bit about what is digital advertising and digital media?
Yeah, I don't think my mom knows what I do still, so it's the thing. Even it's banners and buttons. Like I could target everyone in this conference center right now with a banner using a GPS signal. So I do a lot of that, finding the right data to target the right people, the right sort of experience. I also work with a lot of YouTube content creators to help them create content that supports some of our brands initiatives. So I work with Xbox a lot, for instance, and a lot of Microsoft products. So, digital advertising can be everything from an ad to an experience that you see on the digital screen. And I've worked in this field for 20 years, so I've seen it be a lot of different things. I mentioned content creators and influencers. It's a lot of that these days, and that's something that's popped up in the last few years. When I first got started in this field, though, I went into traditional broadcast, print, out-of-home magazines, and digital was kind of nothing back then. It was just sort of this new emerging thing that nobody was really paying close attention to. I saw that ability to actually see performance data, though, with digital. You could see someone click through and they actually went and bought something. And I knew that data was really powerful, and I could kind of see, this infinite possibilities in front of me of, okay, if I dive into this field, we can really do some cool and scary things. Always turn towards that which is scary, walk towards the things that are challenging. So I dove into digital 20 years ago. It was 1999. It was the Wild West back then, and I've never really looked back. And my objective in making that dive was always financial independence. You know, every superhero has that backstory of struggle that kind of makes them who they are. I grew up in Kansas in a really oppressive environment with an abusive father, so financial independence was everything for me from a very young age. I figured out how to make the most money in media and marketing, and so I chose that field. And when technology started to emerge as a field that was going to grow and be burgeoning, I knew that I'd have a career forever, stability, if I dove into technology. I also wanted to get the hell out of Kansas too. It's not so good there. So, I wanted to live in cosmopolitan cool cities like San Francisco, where I lived for a decade, and Seattle, where I've been for the last decade. And, just do cool work with folks that, I saw myself in. You want to bring your authentic self to a career. You don't want to have to pour yourself into a suit and modify who you are. I've always played in bands, and I wanted to show up as a creative person and have that be something that was embraced in my field. And I feel like I found that.
Love it, love it. So you mentioned financial independence as a driver, and I think that was one of the drivers for my career as well. I graduated from Cornell University with a toddler, so I knew I could be a filmmaker. So I'm like, what's a job where I can still work in media and make an income? And so digital advertising definitely provided that path for me. Rebecca, was financial independence or was that security sort of what drew you to become a test analyst? Because your background is fine arts, right? You're an artist.
Exactly. So I'm actually first generation American. My grandmother grew up in Guatemala City without food and also without a roof over her head. So stability was a huge factor in my family, and I know in the fine arts that's not really a thing. The minute my dad found out that I was an artist as well, he's a chef, he was like, oh crap. So, hereditary. But I kind of knew the same thing. I mean, I've been through the starving artist phase, and it was really hard. It was really, really hard, and I wanted to be able to be who I was and do what I do and also pay rent because this is Seattle and rent is real expensive. So that happy medium for me was going into QA testing and then test analyst now.
Yeah. So what is a test analyst? Like, what are you testing? You analyze?
Sure. So I started off as a video game tester, and test analyst sort of is a tier above that where you're creating test cases to essentially take a piece of technology and find a bug or break it. And this is by means of using it like a user would, turning it off and on 20 times, or finding ways to find that error in the code. So put it blankly is just kind of playing it and using, like for example, I'm just wrapped up testing the VR 180 cameras. So it's turning it off and on, streaming it like a content creator would, and it's just finding a way to mess it up.
Pretty cool, yeah. So did you think you would find yourself there at Google being a test analyst?
No, not at all. I went into video game testing just because for a lot of artists that's how we get into, well at least back then, 4 or 5 years ago, it was a way to get into the gaming community and kind of find out that cadence, that what goes into creating a video game. And QA, quality assurance, is like that last threshold before the game goes out. So there are usually groups of people that test the video games before they're launched to make sure that the game works and functions. Now that's the ideal, and I know that certain games that have come out recently, that's not the case, but that's sort of where that stems from.
So I think someone else who maybe found themselves in a role maybe you didn't anticipate, Megan, you're a writer. And now you write you're basically a mobile storyteller for Pixelberry. Can you tell us a little bit about your work and how you transitioned sort of a traditional writing background to a mobile episodic platform?
Yeah, so I work at, like I said, at Pixelberry Studios. We make a game called Choices, which is kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure game in a digital format where you have your own avatar and you're interacting with characters that have their own digital assets. So instead of it being text, it's people on the screen.
How many people have played it? Because I'm like addicted. I can't connect to it right now, but it is the best. The best. You can play your character, you can design them. It's like The Sims soap opera.
And yeah, so I actually knew that I wanted to be a writer for, I mean, basically, as long as I knew I was a person. But it wasn't until high school that I started to think that video game writing was a viable career option. And so when I went to school, there weren't really game writing programs in college, which there are now. So it is something that you can actually pursue academically, but when I went, it wasn't. And so I tried to tailor my education towards what I wanted to do, and I assumed that that would include programming. But as soon as I started taking programming classes, I realized that I just did not have the math capacity to kind of understand a lot of what was happening. Like, I couldn't apply it myself, wasn't that interested. And so instead, I went into creative writing and theater, and I actually think that the theater aspect of my background helped me a great deal in kind of translating creative writing into a more digital format, because it's all dialogue. You're very rarely writing any kind of blocking, not describing what's happening in the scene, because that should be shown. And so that gave me a better understanding of how to tell a story exclusively through what people are saying to each other. And then, of course, as soon as I graduated, video game writing jobs are few and far between. And so I started working in marketing at a tech company, and I tried again to ask for projects that I felt would kind of increase my skills in the areas that would be required to be a game writer. So I asked for copywriting projects. I asked for sort of projects that allowed me to work behind a camera and be directing people, and I was able to do a lot of projects that were a little bit outside of my job scope just by asking my manager, hey, like, that sounded interesting, would you let me try that? And sometimes they said no, but sometimes they said yes, and that allowed me to put something else on my resume to show, you know, this is something that I have skills in, this is an area that interests me, and I guess that's kind of the story.
Love it. So, Amber, you're also someone who's had a myriad of work experience. If you've worked in human resources, you've worked at, from those areas to program managing tech initiatives.
So for me, I've had a great experience at Microsoft. I've been able to go into different orgs, as when you said HR, been in marketing, been in finance, and now I just wrapped up a project in artificial intelligence, the ethics side of things. And so I've been all over the place. So the key is, all of these areas have transferable skills. And for HR, you need to have critical thinking skills just to make decisions rapidly. Also, there's data analysis skills that you would need because you're looking at a ton of data, both in HR and in artificial intelligence. And so I would say one of the soft skills, especially for ethics, you have to have integrity and you have to become the trusted advisor, because as AI is so new, a lot of the work is confidential, as in with HR, right? And so I've just been able to gain skills as I go along and take them with me to the next project.
Okay, I love it. So you mentioned the data piece is transferable.
Yes.
You mentioned just being trusted and maintain confidentiality.
Yes.
Are there any other skills kind of in these sort of non-traditional, like business, marketing, human resources, finances, that you think really help someone moving into a tech role?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can throw that out to anybody. Anything else you guys think that sort of helped you guys kind of steer your careers towards tech?
I would say, like, just being curious, asking questions, learning about the possibilities of technology. The technology is really about relationships between things. And so if you're good at understanding the relationships between things, you can, in my case, build business cases for the use of tech. And that, is really what kind of landed me in technology, the relationship piece.
And it's also maybe thinking about who are you building the tech for, as opposed to just building tech for tech's sake. I know that we're kind of in that state of Dadaism, we're just building stuff, and that's awesome. But let's think about the folks that perhaps could really benefit from that kind of tech, you know, folks that are disabled or on the autistic spectrum, perhaps they could be, you know, use cases or the researchers that could be benefiting from the tech that's being built.
I mean, we keep saying use cases, but like that's what makes a great piece of technology. Like it enables something, you know. So if you can dream of a possibility that you want to see happen, then it's really just backtracking and finding the tech to make it happen at that point.
So Jane, you have a very similar background, I think, to Rebecca, being an artist, and now you're a UX designer. Talk to us a little bit about like your journey and how you made that transition.
Yeah, so back in 2010, I graduated from University of Washington. So back then, like UX wasn't so popular terminology, and a lot of the pieces or the things that I was doing, it was around like print and branding. And my first job out of college was working for a marketing agency, and I did tons of print-related stuff and branding and other marketing, like creating videos and I think out of those works, the most interesting work for me was like website design, and it was a thing, people weren't really used to like mobile experiences where, nowadays like people will have mobile and they do all the experiences on the small devices, but back then it was all about on the PC and experiences on the bigger laptops. So, and that's the part that was interesting to me the most. So, as a curious person, I took that and I applied to Microsoft, and thankfully, my Korean skill kind of got me there as well, because they were looking for someone who can speak Korean as well as kind of understand the culture to create an experience for Eastern market. So, the good part is like a big corp, like I got to work at a big corp where, I learned a lot of mobile experiences there. So it was kind of a new world for me, like an eye-opening place. So when I was there for 2 years, I learned a ton from just other people and other disciplines. And after that, I think I transitioned more into, I was kind of getting a little bit tired with the politics side of things at Big Corp, and you probably do hear these a lot. And then I started my own agency with my friend, running a design agency, and really helping young people to get their foot into the door, into the professional field. So I did that, and I was working more as a freelance designer for a little bit. And then that kind of, the project that I was involved with and was with Microsoft Venture Accelerator program. So what it is we help multiple startups to get to the point of launching their first product. So it's mostly MVP, which is a most viable product. So kind of the first thing that you test it out to the user, and then if it works, you can deploy it in a bigger scale. So I helped a lot of the teams to have the design, because design is pretty crucial to the user who will be using it. So I did that, and that program was more around home connected devices. So it was a lot of working with hardware and software. And that really triggered me to, I want to learn more about the relationship and learning about ergonomics side of things as well, and how the hardware works with the software. So that in search of looking for another job, because I wanted to go back to working as a full-time, and Honeywell was the company that did that. So hardware, they were very known for hardware industry. So, and then they were looking for designers who can be good at software. So it kind of led me to working at Honeywell.
What a great journey. I think it speaks to the curiosity piece that Megan talked about, and staying curious about not just the work that you're currently doing, but how you can take it to the next level, and then letting that pull you into different career paths. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. What's amazing about this panel, if you guys haven't noticed, is that we have a lot of creatives on this panel, a lot of artists, writers, visual artists, storytellers. So Megan, I'll talk to you first. Can you talk to me a little bit about, because you're a musician, you mentioned you're in a rock band, how you've used creativity in your work and working with digital media and digital technology.
So playing in bands for a long, long time, I've learned how to collaborate. And collaboration is really key in this industry, in any industry involving technology, because typically you're not going to do everything. You're going to partner with a bunch of people that have different superpowers. So collaborating was huge. Also learning when it was time to have a voice and when it was time to kind of step back and let others come in and have a voice. Learning when to shut up and learning when to say, no, I think we should be going a different direction. I think most distinctly too, like the importance of creative process. If you change your creative process, you will have a different outcome. So if you're really feeling stuck and you're doing the same thing over and over again, thinking you're going to have a different result, you need to change your process and fiddle around with it and see where you end up.
Yeah. Anyone else want to take that topic?
Sure. I think one of the things that's been really helpful for me in my career, because part of what I do at Pixelberry is not just the writing of the actual dialogue, but I do write some code, not to the degree that our developers do, but just in order to make the game actually function. And I think that one of the really important things is to remember that there's always more than one way of doing something. A lot of people who go into more technical careers are often taught, like, this is the way that we do it, there's just one path to success. And that isn't true, and it's especially not true when you're working with a lot of different disciplines, with a lot of people who come from different backgrounds, to be thinking about, how can their background help me solve this problem? And I think that coming from more of a creative background, you already are in that mindset that you don't necessarily know the right way to do something, and other people have just as much to contribute as you do.
So Rebecca, has your work as a visual artist enhanced your profession as a tester?
I would think so. I think that creativity allows me to be very empathic, and through that I'm able to kind of at least try to put myself in the shoes of maybe I'm left-handed, right? And not a lot of left-handed people out there, so I tried to think of them when I was in VR, especially when I was at Oculus prior, so I was working on the Oculus Go, thinking about the folks that are left-handed or a little bit more visually different. So, for colorblind folks, if they're able to see what's going on the screen, or also, I got a big head. So, trying all these headsets with my hair is a mess. So I try to think of the folks that are not the standard, right? And you got to think outside the box when you're testing these things, because like I said, QA is that last threshold, and we want to think about the folks that are going to be able to use it and play it and have fun in it and not have their heads mushed.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, we talked about the skill sets that you need to kind of, move from a more liberal arts or arts background into tech. But I want to talk a little bit about the mental and the emotional preparation. Because I think a lot of times, especially for women, it can be really daunting to move into a field that you're just not academically trained in, and to work with people who are more technical, and maybe you're more creative and more artistic. Talk to me a little bit about the psychological preparation and how in your careers you've kind of thwarted that sort of imposter syndrome that I think a lot of professional, a lot of really capable women struggle with.
I'll start. I think you just really have to dig in deep to know that you belong in the room as well. And it was a challenge for me because I'm an introvert and I can sit and observe all day long. But sometimes you just have to jump in so that you can be heard. And so the prep work I did was I took Toastmaster classes, I took executive leadership training, right, just to stretch and grow. Because as a woman, and particularly a woman of color, oftentimes you're not seen or heard. You kind of have to yell and scream, and in a professional way, of course, but that's what I did to prepare myself.
I mean, I think bringing something different to the table, like I'm not doing coding and I'm not actually like implementing the technology, but I understand the business use case, I am creative and I can imagine the possibilities, and so I can complement their skills with mine. And I try and stay focused on that value and what it adds. It's not intimidating, really. You just have to believe that, you know, you're bringing something to the table that is needed.
So I feel really passionate about this. At Google, the only people that I see that look like me are the janitors, the window washers, the people taking out the trash. So even if I'm the only person that looks like me that is there, I have to remind myself and other women of color that work in the tech field, or just women in general, that you belong there. You belong there even if you're the only person that looks like you. So...
And sometimes people will take advantage of that fact, whether knowingly or unknowingly. I know I was at a company, a very small company, where my office was me and 3 other people, all of them middle-aged white men. And I, as their manager of marketing, was asked to order office supplies. And I was like, can anyone tell me why I'm being asked to do this when nobody else, like we don't have an office manager or an executive assistant or anything to do that, but it's also not my job. So that's what I said. They never asked me to order those office supplies.
So do you think that as women, or women of color, that, you know, working in tech, do you think that it's made it harder? I mean, obviously it's been headline news about the diversity problem in Silicon Valley and the backlash that people of color and women have been getting who work at a lot of those companies. Do you think that just the dynamic of being who we are has made it more difficult?
I mean, I don't know. I've had a lot of bad behavior that I've been on the receiving end of. You know, I made a huge strategy plus tech project for a very large big box retailer about 10 years ago, and it basically was like a money printing machine for them. Just made them a ton of money. And at the Christmas party, the CMO decided he was going to grab my ass. And so, you know, there's things like that where you find yourself in a situation where, you know, your intelligence and your smarts and your perseverance has really led to an innovation that changed a company, and that's the things that you get. That's the treatment that you get. That's the disrespect that you get. But you know, that is not something that defines me. That's something that defines the person who did that to me. And you know, I promptly found another job and let them figure out how they're going to continue to make that money printing machine work on their own.
I think for me, the challenges and difficulties that I had throughout my career is mostly around language barrier, because I came here when I was in middle school, and I learned how to speak with other people, and then in a total different language, and culture is obviously different. So the way I do things might be accepted differently here. So I think that was the hardest thing that I constantly run into in my workplace. And I think I think I'm getting used to how to get around it, and the things that it helps me to have really good people around you, as well as to really create the story, or you can at least control your area, and other people might kind of try to get over it, but at least for instance, like meeting, I do meetings all the time for some reason these days, but as a designer, I can prep my the whole meeting agenda because I know what I'm going to talk about. So these initial prepping is going to help you to get those noise out of the way, because some people might say, what are you talking about? And then if I have a good deck that really presents what I'm talking about with a good rationale behind why I'm doing that, it's going to help you to at least protect your boundary. So I think that's what's really important for us, and that's what, I've been really putting a lot of time into it. It doesn't take extra time, but I think it's worth it at the end.
Yeah, I think it's also important to remember that what differentiates you, even if other people don't see it this way, is pointing out the ability to speak Korean is part of why she was hired for that job. And then in my case, because my company targets primarily, like women 15 to 40, as a female writer, I have a certain perspective that I can bring to the table that male writers might not necessarily have access to, and therefore when I'm writing a story from the perspective of a female character, it's a little bit more genuine and authentic. So people might give you a hard time for those things that set you apart, but they are what makes you an asset.
I do want to open it up to Q&A. It's really important that we want to give you guys value. We want you guys to learn from our experiences and our journeys. So with that said, are there any questions in the audience that you guys have for myself or any of the panelists?
Not so much a question as a comment, but I have a very similar background to Amber in that I'm also a program manager at a technology company, and I work in IT compliance, and that's another really great way to, if you don't have a technical background, compliance, it sounds like it really sucks and it's really boring, but it's really not. And what I like to tell people is, as far as transferable skills goes, if you can read, you can do compliance, because a lot of it is just, reading, analyzing, and interpreting, how certain controls apply to a business. So I want to put that out there as another good suggestion if you're looking for.
I love that.
Very cool.
Thank
What
you.
was your background before that?
I worked in HR as a data analyst.
Okay, there you go. I love it. That's cool.
What language can you use with others or yourself to reinforce, so you aren't always saying, I don't code, but, or if they approach you, I know you don't code, so.
ADB command. ADB command. It is what you use in order to, unlock your phone, Android phones. So those are a good way to update builds and stuff. So ADB command.
Wait, I'm not sure I got that. So yeah, repeat that again. So the question is,
What language?
how do you not disqualify yourself by constantly saying, hey, I know I don't code, or I know I'm not an engineer, but.
Oh, sorry.
Oops. That was
Well, now you know.
super practical advice though, and I appreciate it.
So good.
I mean, I listen a lot for context clues, and I've tried to learn enough that I can speak some of the language with them. And I present myself as someone who is really minding the business, minding the monetization of what we're doing, minding the creative vision. So I don't feel like I have to speak their language. I have to make sure that they understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the business and the creative and the strategy and all that. So we meet across the aisle somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I work with product teams constantly at Oracle. In the Oracle Data Cloud, I think I'm really lucky because I work with, and they are mostly men who are sort of data specialists and manage our data platform solutions. But they all come from sort of entrepreneurial backgrounds, which I think has sort of wired them a little bit more to think less about gender and more about who is the best person to get this job done, and let's all roll up our sleeves and get it done, because we've got to work on this. And that attitude shift has been so key. And so, to Megan's point though, when I interact with them, half the time I don't know what they're talking about, and I'll ask questions, and sometimes I will say, I need to know this in order to build the business plan. Or I need to know this in order to productize it so that we can sell it, so they understand why I'm asking. And usually that is enough for them to kind of okay, let me take it a step back. But I also, as Megan said, really try to focus on the value that I'm bringing, right? They've never presented a product solution to an advertising agency. I have. They don't know how to do that. They don't know how to package that. That's what I'm bringing to the table. And in order for our company to make money, they need me as much as I need them. And so constantly reminding yourself of that, and it is like a boost to talk, a pep talk that you have to give yourself, but I give that pep talk to myself throughout the day, and it seems to work.
I think there's also something to be said for remembering that even though it's not necessarily always considered as such in, like the greater world, but creative fields are skilled fields. And so then, just because you might not know how to code, well, they might not know how to write or how to make a piece of fine art. And so you're equally qualified to be a part of that conversation. It doesn't discount you from having an opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Like, quality assurance is part of the dev team, and not a lot of people talk about it. It's an incredibly scientific way of looking at something. So, going back to the question is, what language should I use in order to say, like, hey, I don't speak code, but find out kind of what the product does, what the product is intended to do, and that kind of helps build that bridgeway to speak to the engineers and have an idea of what is this supposed to do so I can help with the team.
Another thing that I want to add is, remember always design and technology and business goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
So technology, as technology gets evolves, designer has to learn new things and stuff. So thankfully, you don't have to idle code. You don't have to code these days because there are so many tools out there that does that job for you. So sometimes as a designer, you just have to be mindful that how do you utilize those tool set so that it makes you successful. So I think, you don't have to say I don't code, but I use this product in order to execute the same job that you want me to do.
I don't know if any of you guys know this, but are there any fields or jobs or whatever that you know of that take skills like the ones you guys have and work with accessible technology?
So repeat that one more time, please.
So accessible technology, like people with disabilities,
Yeah.
are there anything that people with skill sets like you guys do in fields like that you know of?
As far as my industry goes, like I work a lot with Microsoft. They have a lot of products and offerings and innovations in that space. They've been very successful with Xbox in particular. And it's really just understanding the target audience, who's going to really have the use of these products, and what do you need to say to them, how do you get in front of them, and that would be my only interaction with that space.
So I've seen two, one of which is I know some YouTube content creators will pay for you to write in the subtitles for their videos. I know Markiplier does it. Also with the VR 180 app, which I just recently wrapped up on, we had the read through, so where your Android phone will read to you what is on the page, the splash page. So those are two instances where I've seen. You have to ask, you have to ask for it though. A lot of accessibility, unfortunately, is definitely on the back burner in terms of tech development. So that would be something I'd love to highlight.
I'd say for me in artificial intelligence, on the ethics side, some of their ethical mandates are inclusion, right, and reliability. So the product should work for most people. I think Microsoft is on the leading edge in that they are being intentional about being inclusive, not just for race, but for people with physical challenges who also would like to participate in this new area.
That's a space that a lot of tech brands are trying to innovate in, and it aligns with their values. And so even if you're showing up to a job interview and that's not necessarily part of the remit, asking and carving out a space for yourself and sponsoring for that, that voice of that community, I think would be very welcome in this day and age.
There's also an area of tech that we didn't really talk about, and it's sort of an extension of digital advertising, and we call it trafficking. And essentially, it's a team of folks, or ad operations, they've made it fancy now. And essentially, it's a team of folks who are responsible for getting the banner, the creative, right, that the creative agency created, over to the website that you want to run it on. and making sure that all the tracking mechanisms are in place, so that you know how many of those banners actually served up to a consumer, how many people clicked on it, and making sure all of that tracking is in place. So it's either called trafficking, or ad operations. And there was a company based in Chicago, and I think it was started by a former Razorfish guy. I don't know if you remember him. It's called Anomaly, and he basically started it because he wanted a job for his autistic son. And so essentially he hires autistic young adults to do ad trafficking. My son is on the spectrum, and one of the things, one of the characteristics of being on the spectrum often is that you're really good with repetitive work, things that have a pattern, right? And trafficking has a really consistent pattern. And so autistic youth do really well in that field. And so he created this company, he hires autistic young adults, and they essentially keep online advertising working. And the advertising agencies, large digital advertising agencies, will hire them as contractors to come in and help support their work. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Oh, we have a few in the front, and then we'll get you next.
What you all were saying about curiosity really resonated with me. I'm a very curious person, and so I work in marketing and communications and content, and partly because of my curiosity, I've dealt with like a lot of different kinds of subject matter. I've worked for an art museum, I've worked for a place that was publishing scientific journal articles, and just done a real variety of things. But when I go into a job interview, for some reason I get that imposter syndrome, and I feel like apologizing that I haven't spent the last 10 years working like on their thing, on their industry. And I don't know how to change my mindset so that the broader experience and the curiosity is an asset that I'm bringing to the table instead of something that I feel compelled to apologize for.
Yeah, I mean, curiosity is definitely an asset, and if you find yourself in an interview where you don't believe that's surfacing in the values of the people who are interviewing you, it's probably a bad match to start, honestly. But thinking through all of the experience that you've had and how it does apply to what they're doing, and just finding that basis of competence and that story, you know, so you're not apologizing. You're like, I did this and it could make sense here in this way, you know. I don't know. I mean, I think you can go into job interviews these days and say, you know, curiosity, strength, vulnerability, these are all things that are very important to me and how I show up every single day. And if somebody that is interviewing you resonates with that, then you're probably going to find a good cultural match, you know. So own yourself.
I kind of had the same process. I never really toyed with the VR headset at all. So there is likeness in every single job that you've had that has led up to your career now. For example, there was a gentleman that joined Oculus as an art director, but he had come from the film industry. And there's of course similarities, but I'm sure he played up to like his responsibilities, team leads, what it took to get him there, and I'm sure it would be the same thing in order to find the same like kind of values that you have that can play into your job interviews. But I understand it's hard to be somebody that is specialized because you need the experience in order to kind of get where you are in the first place.
Yeah, I would just add, go through the exercise if you haven't already. This is for everyone. Take your resume and pull out, you know, kind of cast aside all the things that are just related to that specific job and identify those broader themes. Project management, right? Team coaching and mentorship, leadership, fiscal management, like all of these things are, I think as Rebecca was saying, involved in multiple, you know, roles, but if you've been doing it for 5 or 10 years, you're probably pretty good at it, right? And so that's an advantage that you bring to the interview. It's just being able to pull out those sort of trends and those themes, and then really sell those up for whatever new role or position you're seeking.
Yeah, and I mean, whatever industry you work in, technology is disrupting your industry, and so there is the opportunity to find tech-adjacent careers no matter what you're doing right now. You have to move towards it, though. You can't let it be something that is too daunting because you haven't done it before. And tech is interesting because it's cumulative, and once you start to understand some bits and pieces of it, the minutia of it, you can understand a lot more. It builds pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so get in and understand the basics now.
I think also a lot of those of us who are in kind of the tech adjacent careers, or in particular really curious people, tend to be jacks of all trades. And that's definitely something, or Jills of all trades, that's definitely something that you can leverage in an interview when you can say, like, I don't know, for me, for example, when I was trying to show that I have coding experience, I was like, well, okay, my job has never included coding experience, but I did make my own Neopets pet pages.
There you go.
And I taught myself that because it's something that I wanted to learn, and like now I can competently make a web page. And so, like, yeah, I'm not a coder, but I was able to kind of use a part of my past and something that I was just interested in to show, like, I can absolutely master this because it's something I'm interested in. Just not necessarily having that skill right now doesn't mean that I won't have it in, you know, a week or a month or however long it takes to get up to speed in this job.
I think that's really cool what you were talking about, though, like showing up as your full self, you know, not just being like, this is my professional sliver that I'm going to put out there. Like, think about everything you're doing and how does it apply, you know? I show up to job interviews and talk about how I've been in a band for 20 years, and I think for some people they're like, weird. But I'm attached to the creative community, the creative process, you know, I can be creative. Like, there's a lot of value in that, what I do.
And I think that's really true. On a lot of my job interviews, I do mention that I'm a published science fiction and art fantasy writer, and that I'm creative, and that has actually, I think, worked in my advantage in digital marketing and audience marketing more than against, because it means that I'm thinking in a different way, and I'm bringing a different mindset and view to the role. So we have one more question in the back. We have two more in the back.
So as somebody looking for tech positions or positions in the tech industry, how do you make yourself stand out to recruiters before you even get to meet them? Like, what do you put in your resume? What makes you stand out as somebody with a creative background versus a tech background?
I mean, I'm a big fan of trying to actually meet people, you know, finding them either in an environment like this or finding them on, you know, networking sites or what have you, and asking them to go get coffee, you know. It's really hard to stand out with a cover letter in your resume or, and, you know, all that jazz. But like, it's, you know, you gotta really go after and hunt those people down, you know, and try and shake their hand.
Yeah, I go to quite a few networking events myself. I ended up building some community, but in order to stand out, a lot of it has to do with referral, because let's be honest, in the tech community, you gotta know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows that recruiter that's gonna get you in. That's the real talk. Secondly is networking with intent. Don't just go up to them and be like, I think I want a job. No, girl. Have a title, at least a title or some sort of job description in mind, and work towards that, and then showing up to the recruiter. Because a lot of the recruiters in those LinkedIn messages get about like 600 of those, 600 applicants, and how many hundreds of people asking them like to pick their brain. Don't do any of that. Face-to-face usually works, networking, and there's always somebody within your own network that perhaps could have connections to them.
I mean, you want to find the hiring manager, you know, the person who ultimately is going to make that decision.
Yep.
You know, you don't want to rely on the recruiter. That's not the hand that you're trying to shake.
Yeah, but also, like Megan said, I want to emphasize the coffees, right? Even if it's not the hiring manager, but it's someone who works in the group, who can tell you about the role, like just having coffee with them, sitting down with them, talking to them a little bit about yourself, you know, that can help you get your resume on the desk of that hiring manager, and it can help you when you go through the interview process to come to the top of the list in terms of consideration. Okay, more question?
Sorry, one statement for that, and then I'll do my question. She asked about inclusivity, like jobs. Skills, if you're in this area, Skills also hires lots of, they work with handicapped people.
Oh, that's great.
Skills,
For
yeah.
those who didn't hear it, Skills is another company that's, so are they hiring
They hire for, as far as I know, we work with them in the tech industry. They do a lot of testing, and we have a couple of deaf people that work in the mailroom, and they do, anyway, they hire all sorts of people from any background, so.
Love it, thank you.
Get his business card, y'all.
And then, sorry, my question is, if you have a specific job title, but you have been doing something else, like right now, I am a lab engineer, but I've been doing project management work. How do I put that in a resume to make it actually
Well, I mean,
seem
there's
like
the
I'm a
job
person?
title and then there's the tasks associated with the job. And so highlight project management as the key tasks that are of value there.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think job titles mean anything anymore.
No, they really don't. We'll just be making them up.
Yeah.
And always have multiple resumes, right?
Yeah.
So you can craft it to whichever job you're leaning towards.
Yeah.
We've got 5 more minutes. I definitely want to leave everyone with some parting words of wisdom. So starting with Megan and working our way down, in about a minute or less, can you just give some advice to anyone in the audience who wants to work in a tech or tech adjacent field, but doesn't have a coding, engineering, STEM background?
I mean, I think I've said it more or less before, but start to just educate yourself, get close to that work, get in on the ground level no matter where you're at in your career. And you don't have to learn it so much as understand it, which is different. I know that sounds strange, but understand the applications to your world, you know, and what you're doing. And I think more than anything, and this is a lesson for life as much as your career, move towards that which scares you, you know, jump into it, because it's not going to just find you, and it's not going to get easier, and as time goes on, you'll end up 20 years later, and this is your career. So put one foot in front of the other and move towards that which scares you.
Love it.
So, super quick, I'm reading through the Silmarillion right now. And one of the best pieces of advice I've gotten is you don't need to memorize all the names right now because JRR is the homie and he's going to bring them up again. So, you don't have to know every single piece of technology before you go into tech. I've gotten a lot farther being myself than I ever have trying to fit into this mold of whatever techie is. You can listen to your trap music, your death metal music, your metalocalypse and still like kick butt at what you do.
And real quick, Rebecca, talk to me about feedback.
Oh, my art, hey. So, I, outside of this test analyst thing, I'm a 3D artist freelancer. The one on the left is a mistake. I thought that my commissioned friend had wanted a ballerina elephant. She actually wanted a ballerina on an elephant on the right. That being said, I made a mistake. I made a 3-hour mistake. But what I ended up doing was communicating with her, saying, I apologize. And I said, I thought this is what you wanted. And she clarified with me what it is she actually needed. I think it was for her niece or what have you. But the thing is, I came forward with a mistake that I made and I fixed it. And that speaks to everything, is using that empathy, using those human skills and not being, evil and saying, okay, I'll fix this for you because this was on me. So taking ownership of that is what kind of helps me in my own test field. Taking ownership, using empathy, being a good human, and then making it right.
Love it, thank you.
Elephants.
James, parting words of wisdom.
I think for me, it's more around the people, and it's pretty crucial in my life. I met great people around me, and I think that's why I'm here. Especially like managers, because they do gonna affect you as far as your career growth. And when you work in a field for a little bit, like you hit that point where I wanna, grow more, but you feel very limited. Like, where should I go next? And it's going to be the people around you who are always caring for you and who will put you in that successful position. And those are the people that you should always keep in touch with and talk to. Mm-hmm. And hey, raise question if you are looking for a job. You have to speak it out. like, you know,
Build your
like, hey,
network.
yeah, okay, I am here, you know, like, so I think just, you know, utilize those people around you, and then they will, you know, come into your life and help you.
Okay, Megan and Amber, we're at time, but really quickly, our advice, Lisa.
Really quickly, my advice is twofold. The first piece is take advantage of opportunities that are presented to you, but also never work for free in a professional capacity. Because the tech industry is notorious for taking advantage of its workers, especially those who are underrepresented. And so, yeah, you will get a lot of opportunities to do extra work, but make sure you're doing extra work that actually helps you in the career you want, and not just doing it because you're afraid that, you know, you'll be retaliated against or something. Like, stand up for yourself, but also know that, you know, there are a lot of opportunities outside of just your specific job responsibilities.
And quickly, I'd say find someone who's doing what you want to do. Ask them questions, right? Also get a mentor and a sponsor, know the difference between the two, and repeat that cycle so you can help somebody else.
Okay, in mind, be fearless, be confident, give yourself a pep talk every morning. You got this. Thank you.